I was 31 when I thought I had already endured every test life could throw at me. That night in Chicago would prove me wrong. I walked into my brother's birthday party expecting polite smiles, champagne, maybe a toast that mentioned my recent promotion. What I got instead was betrayal wrapped in glittering chandeliers and clinking glasses. The penthouse where the party was held overlooked the river. From the balcony, the skyline pulsed with light, a view people would kill for. Inside, the place buzzed with more than 40 guests. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio played in the corner. My parents had spared no expense for Lucas, their golden son, while I had chipped in for the wine and the catering without anyone acknowledging it. I took a slow sip of champagne, reminding myself that this night was about him, not me. Lucas arrived in a tailored suit, laughing too loudly, slapping backs, soaking up praise like a sponge. My mother hovered near him, straightening his collar as though he were still a boy. My father beamed, calling him the star of the evening. I stood quietly near the window, adjusting the strap of my dress, blending into the background as usual. Half an hour later, the music softened. My father tapped a glass with a spoon and lifted a microphone as if he were addressing a conference hall. The chatter died down, all eyes turning toward him. I expected a sentimental speech, maybe a joke at Lucas's expense. Instead, his words dropped like a bomb. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate my son's 34th birthday, and we have an announcement that will make this evening even more special. My daughter, Melissa, has decided to gift her beautiful condo to her brother. She wants to see him start fresh, and she believes family should come first." The crowd clapped, their faces turned toward me with admiration, some already whispering about what a generous sister I was. My blood turned to ice. My condo, the one I had bought after years of saving, the place that symbolized every late night and every risk I had taken, was being handed away like a party favor. I stood frozen, my champagne glass trembling in my hand. Lucas put on a show of surprise, pressing his hand to his chest, though I caught the smirk that betrayed him. He had known all along. My mother nodded proudly, as if she were part of a charitable act. Relatives leaned forward, their eyes sparkling with expectation. I set the glass down with a quiet clink and forced my voice steady. "No," I said. The applause faltered. The room went still. My father's face stiffened, his smile cracking. "What did you say?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I am not giving up my home. I worked for it. Every late night, every project, every promotion paid for it. Lucas's struggles are not mine to fix." Gasps circled the room. My mother's lips thinned. My aunt muttered, "Selfish." A cousin whispered, "Ungrateful." Lucas lowered his gaze, hiding the fury behind his eyes. The judgment pressed in like a suffocating fog. My father stepped forward, his jaw tight, the microphone still in his hand. His voice dropped into a growl. "You are defying me?" I held my ground. "Yes." The sound came before I could brace myself. His hand cracked across my cheek, the pain blooming hot as my head snapped to the side. My earring flew across the floor, glinting beneath the chandelier. A stunned silence swallowed the room. Someone near the bar fumbled with a phone, the red glow of a recording light appearing. I touched my face, refusing to cry. The guests stared, whispers replacing applause. Lucas feigned shock, but I caught the flicker of triumph in his expression. My mother rushed forward. "Apologize to your father," she hissed, as if I were the one who had crossed a line. I straightened, swallowing the rage boiling in my chest. My fingers closed around the earring as I bent to retrieve it. I stood tall again, looking at Lucas. "Happy birthday," I said softly, slipping the pearl into my pocket. Without another glance, I walked toward the door. The crowd parted in silence, their judgment heavy on my back. In the hallway, the music faded, replaced by the pounding of my own heartbeat. My cheek throbbed, but my hands were steady. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used but always kept close. The line rang once, then twice, before a calm, strong voice answered. "Melissa?" "Grandma," I whispered, my throat tightening. "He hit me. He tried to take my condo, in front of everyone." There was no pause on the other end. "Stay where you are," she said, her tone sharp as steel. "I am coming." I leaned against the cold wall of the corridor, the noise of the party muffled behind the heavy doors. My fingers shook around the phone, but hearing her voice steadied me. I had always known that Grandma Eleanor saw through the illusions my parents built, but I had never asked for her help. Tonight, I needed her. "Are you alone?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice low. "Everyone's inside. They're celebrating Lucas while My words trailed off, the memory of the slap burning fresh on my cheek. "You don't have to explain," she cut in firmly. "I saw this day coming. Give me 30 minutes. The line clicked. I lowered the phone, my chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of hope. I walked outside onto the balcony, letting the cool night air wash over me. The city glittered below, trains rumbling in the distance, horns echoing faintly. People were living their ordinary lives, unaware of the storm brewing in one penthouse high above. I clutched the railing, reminding myself that I wasn't powerless, no matter how much they tried to strip me of my dignity. When I finally stepped back inside, I didn't return to the party. Instead, I lingered in the entryway, hearing the muffled laughter and clinking glasses. The celebration continued as though nothing had happened, as though my humiliation was just another toast to be brushed aside. Minutes dragged into half an hour. My phone buzzed with a text. "Here." The elevator doors opened, and out stepped Eleanor, her silver cane tapping the floor with deliberate rhythm. She wore a tailored coat, her posture tall, her gaze cutting through the room like a blade. Even at 82, she commanded attention the way others only dreamed of. I followed her back toward the main hall. As the doors opened, conversations stuttered and stopped. One by one, heads turned. The music faltered, then ceased altogether. Eleanor didn't speak at first. She let the silence stretch, her presence enough to choke the air. Finally, her voice rose, calm but laced with fire. "Daniel," she said, addressing my father by his name instead of calling him son, "tell me why you dared to lay a hand on my granddaughter." My father paled, the microphone slipping slightly in his grasp. My mother gasped, clutching his arm. Lucas's smug expression vanished, replaced with uncertainty. Guests shifted uneasily, their phones rising again to capture what was happening. They all knew, in that moment, that the night had turned. Eleanor's cane struck the floor once, the sharp sound echoing through the silence. "You have disgraced this family, and now, you will answer for it." From the moment Eleanor spoke, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The chatter that had filled the room earlier dissolved into a heavy silence, replaced by the weight of her words. No one dared to move. Even the waiters froze mid-step, balancing trays of untouched champagne. My father opened his mouth, trying to summon the same commanding tone he always used on us. "Mother, it was a misunderstanding." "Silence," she cut in, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. The power in her words didn't come from volume, but from the absolute certainty that she would be obeyed. She took a step forward, her cane tapping against the marble floor, each strike punctuating her disapproval. She turned her gaze toward me, then back to the crowd. "This young woman," she said, pointing her cane in my direction, "has worked harder than anyone in this family. She built her life with her own hands, and you..." She shifted her eyes back to my father. "You tried to take it from her. Worse, you dared to strike her in front of witnesses. Tell me, Daniel, what does that make you? A father or a tyrant?" Gasps rippled across the guests. My aunt covered her mouth, muttering something about family shame. My cousin exchanged wide-eyed glances with his wife, their phones now openly recording. My mother stammered. "Mother, please, you don't understand. Melissa has always been difficult." "Difficult?" Eleanor's voice rose, her silver hair catching the chandelier's glow. "She is strong, she is determined, and she is everything you failed to be." She jabbed the cane toward my mother. "And you, Susan, you have spent decades coddling Lucas while ignoring the daughter who needed you most. You rewarded laziness and punished achievement. Do not speak to me about difficult. Speak to me about disgrace." The words landed like stones in a pond, rippling outward. I felt the blood rush to my face, not from shame, but from the sudden realization that someone finally saw me. Eleanor's defense wrapped around me like armor. Lucas finally tried to interject, his voice smooth, practiced. "Grandma, you're overreacting. Melissa knows I'm just trying to get back on my feet. She doesn't even need that condo." "Enough!" Eleanor snapped, the tip of her cane striking the floor again. "You are 34 years old, Lucas. 34. And what have you accomplished? Parties, excuses, endless promises that lead nowhere. Your sister owes you nothing. If you had even a fraction of her resolve, you would not be standing here begging for her roof over your head." Lucas's face reddened, his composure unraveling. He glanced at the guests, hoping for their sympathy, but found only eyes filled with judgment or fascination. Eleanor took a deep breath, her shoulders straight. "I have made my decision," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "As of tonight, I will rewrite my will. Every asset, every property, every investment I hold will go to Melissa. She has proven her worth not only to me, but to herself. The rest of you will inherit nothing." The words detonated like fireworks. My mother let out a strangled cry, her hand flying to her chest. Lucas staggered back as though he had been struck. My father's jaw clenched, his face drained of all color. Around us, the guests whispered furiously, their phones capturing every tear, every tremble, every ounce of the unraveling Carter family. My aunt muttered to my uncle, "This is outrageous," but neither of them dared raise their voices against Eleanor. Lucas fell into a chair, his eyes glassy. His fiancée, seated beside him, edged away slowly, her hand slipping from his arm. The moment wasn't lost on the crowd. Someone whispered, "She's not staying after this." My mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, tried again. "Please, mother, we are still family. Don't tear us apart in front of everyone." Eleanor's gaze did not soften. "I am not tearing you apart. You did that yourselves. You raised your son on lies and entitlement, and you tried to crush your daughter for daring to succeed without your approval. No more." Her eyes swept across the crowd. "Let this be a lesson. Respect is not owed by blood. It is earned by action. Tonight, Melissa has my respect, my trust, and my legacy." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the jazz trio in the corner had set down their instruments, unsure if they would ever play again that night. I stood rooted in place, every eye in the room on me, every word Eleanor spoke echoing in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Lucas buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. My father looked as though he might collapse. My mother clung to him, whispering frantically, but her voice broke into sobs. Eleanor finally turned to me, her gaze softening, just slightly. "Come, child," she said. "You are the future of this family. Stand tall." I stepped forward, my legs trembling but my back straight. When I reached her side, she placed her hand over mine. The warmth of her touch steadied me. The room erupted again in whispers, phones flashing like paparazzi cameras. I knew this moment would not stay within these walls. By morning, the world would see everything. And strangely, I welcomed it. Eleanor raised her chin, her final words slicing through the chaos. "This party is over." She turned, guiding me toward the exit as though nothing more needed to be said. The crowd parted, stunned into silence once more. Behind us, the remnants of the Carter family's illusion of perfection crumbled under the weight of truth. As the elevator doors closed, I exhaled for the first time since the night began. My cheeks still burned, but inside, a fire had ignited that no one could put out. The elevator descended slowly, each floor passing like the tick of a clock counting down to a new beginning. I stared at the glowing numbers above the door, my reflection faint in the mirrored surface. My cheek still throbbed from my father's slap, but it was no longer pain that consumed me. It was a strange mixture of defiance and relief, as though something inside me had snapped free the moment I said no. Eleanor stood beside me, her grip firm on her cane. She didn't speak until the doors opened to the lobby, where the sound of our steps echoed across the marble floor. Only then did she glance at me. "You did well," she said softly, her eyes glinting with pride. "You stood your ground." Her praise made my throat tighten. For so long I had craved even a fraction of that recognition from my parents, but it had never come. To hear it now, from the one person who had always seen me clearly, was enough to steady me. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around us. Chicago's skyline stretched high above, bright and indifferent to the chaos we had left behind. Eleanor's driver pulled up, opening the door of a sleek black sedan. She motioned for me to get in first. As I settled into the leather seat, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The ride was quiet. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the blur of lights as the city sped past. My phone buzzed on my lap with message after message, but I ignored it. I already knew what it would say. Guests whispering about the scandal, friends checking if I was okay, maybe even strangers commenting as the first clips from the party spread online. When we arrived at my building, Eleanor turned to me. "They will come to you, Melissa," she warned. "With apologies, with excuses, with pleas, You must remember what happened tonight. Do not let their words undo your strength. I nodded, though my chest ached. I know. Her eyes softened again. Rest. Tomorrow, the world will know the truth, and you will be ready for it. I watched her car pull away before stepping into the lobby of my condo. The doorman glanced at me, concern flickering across his face, but he said nothing. By the time I closed my own door behind me, silence settled over the space like a blanket. My sanctuary, my home. The one thing they had tried to take from me. I collapsed onto the couch, my phone still buzzing with notifications. Against my better judgment, I unlocked it. Dozens of messages filled the screen. Friends, colleagues, even old classmates. At the top of the feed was a video already gaining thousands of views. My father's voice rang out, announcing my supposed gift. My refusal cut through, followed by the sharp crack of his hand against my cheek. Gasps, whispers, the frantic voices of the guests, and finally, the moment Eleanor arrived, her words slicing through the chaos. Comments scrolled faster than I could read. This is disgusting. How could a father do this? Melissa deserves better. Hashtags attached to my name spread like wildfire. I set the phone down, overwhelmed, but beneath the exhaustion, I felt something else. Validation. For once, the world wasn't siding with them. It was siding with me. The night stretched long, but I didn't sleep much. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside my window. My family's betrayal played over in my mind, each memory sharper than the last. Yet, alongside the pain, there was clarity. A line had been drawn, and I had chosen myself. By morning, the story had spread beyond Chicago. News outlets picked it up, replaying the video on loop. Headlines flashed across my phone. Family patriarch strikes daughter at birthday bash. Matriarch cuts off fortune in shocking twist. Reporters camped outside my building, their cameras waiting for a glimpse of me. I pulled the curtain shut, unwilling to give them more. Later that day, I heard from a mutual friend that Lucas's fiancée had called off the engagement. Her family didn't want to be tied to scandal, not when clips of Lucas smirking as I was humiliated were being dissected online. My father's company lost 2 major clients overnight, both citing reputational concerns. My mother's social circle turned cold, invitations withdrawn, whispers spreading faster than she could manage. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was numb. Their downfall wasn't my victory. It was simply the result of choices they had made, lies they had nurtured. I wanted no part in it anymore. That evening, my doorbell rang. I hesitated before opening it, already knowing who it would be. My parents stood there, their faces drawn and weary. My father's shoulders slumped, the confidence gone from his eyes. My mother's makeup was streaked from tears. "Melissa," he began, his voice low, "we need to talk." I didn't move to let them in. "We're sorry," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. It went too far. The pressure, the guests, supporting Lucas, it got out of hand. Her words washed over me. Rehearsed, fragile. I folded my arms. "You think an apology fixes this? You demanded my home. You struck me in front of everyone. And now that the world is watching, you come here begging for forgiveness?" My father flinched, but my mother pressed on. "We are family. We made a mistake. Please." I shook my head, my jaw tight. "Your mistake cost me my trust. You chose Lucas over me again and again. This time, you crossed a line I will never forget." Tears pooled in her eyes. She reached out, her hand trembling, but I stepped back. "Please, Melissa," she whispered. I closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in the silence, sealing the distance between us. My heart pounded, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't their pawn anymore. The next day, Sophie came over, her arms wrapping me in a fierce hug. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice steady. "They don't get to walk back what they did." I nodded, pouring us both coffee as the morning sun streamed in. "The internet's tearing them apart," I said, sliding my phone across the table. She scanned the posts, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. "Good," she replied. "Let them face the consequences." Her words settled into me like an anchor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my family's approval. I didn't need it anymore. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Every time I stepped outside, eyes followed me. Strangers recognized me on the street, some offering quiet words of support, others snapping photos as if I were a character in a film. News vans lingered near my building, eager to catch the next development in the story that had gripped the city. Clips of the slap, of Eleanor's fiery speech, and of my parents' faces as the world turned against them had gone viral, dissected in talk shows and podcasts, debated across social media platforms. At first, the attention overwhelmed me. I had never wanted to be famous. My life had always been about working hard, achieving quietly, and building something real for myself. But now, people treated me as a symbol. Some saw strength, some saw defiance, and others simply saw scandal. I tried to keep my head down, continuing my work at the design firm, but even colleagues whispered when I walked into the office. Their whispers weren't cruel, though they carried respect. For once, people were admiring me not for what I owned or what I provided, but for standing my ground. Meanwhile, my family unraveled further. Lucas retreated from public life, his once constant social media posts disappearing overnight. His fiancée's family had confirmed that the wedding was off, citing the irreversible stain the Carter name carried after the incident. Friends who had once celebrated his carefree charm now avoided him, unwilling to be associated with his downfall. My father's company, once considered a pillar in local business circles, lost contract after contract. Clients didn't want to risk their brands being tied to his name. Rumors swirled about investors pulling out, about employees questioning his leadership. For a man who had always defined himself by his authority, the collapse cut deeper than any words could. My mother fared no better. Once the queen of charity galas and social luncheons, she found herself isolated. Invitations dried up. Former friends whispered behind her back, mocking the very entitlement she had once flaunted. Her attempts to defend Lucas in interviews only fueled public anger. The world had seen the video, they knew the truth. And then there was Eleanor. She did not shy away from the attention. If anything, she embraced it, making her stance clear in interviews when approached. "Melissa is the only one in this family who has ever stood on her own 2 feet," she said once, her voice calm but unyielding. "I will not reward cowardice or cruelty. My estate will go to her because she has earned it." Those words, replayed endlessly on television and online, only amplified the rift between me and the rest of my family. My parents tried to contact me countless times. Calls, emails, handwritten letters slipped under my door, but I ignored them all. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. One evening, as I sat in my condo with Sophie, scrolling through a fresh wave of online commentary, she looked at me and asked, "Do you ever feel guilty, seeing them fall apart like this?" I paused, the question settling heavy in the room. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not because I think I was wrong, but because part of me still remembers wanting their approval. Even now, a piece of me aches when I see my mother cry or hear about my father's struggles." Sophie leaned forward, her eyes steady on mine. "That's because you're human, Melissa. But don't confuse guilt with responsibility. They created this mess. They hit you, humiliated you, and tried to take away everything you built. You don't owe them forgiveness just because they're family." Her words sank deep, pulling at something inside me. For so long, I had equated family with duty, even when it hurt me. Now, I was learning that boundaries weren't betrayal, they were survival. A month after the party, Eleanor invited me to lunch at her favorite cafe, a quiet spot tucked away on a side street. We sat by the window, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filling the air. She slid an envelope across the table, her hands steady despite her age. Inside were legal documents, pages outlining the transfer of her estate, investments, and properties. My name was printed clearly, the sole heir. My breath caught as I looked up at her. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, though my hands trembled as I held the papers. "I do," she said firmly. "I am not leaving my legacy to those who squander it. You, Melissa, have proven yourself. Not because of wealth, not because of status, but because of your strength. You remind me of myself when I was young." Her eyes softened with memory, and for a moment, I saw not the fierce matriarch who had silenced a room, but a woman who had once fought her own battles. "Take it," she said. "And when the time comes, use it to build, not to destroy." I swallowed hard, emotion rising in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, "for believing in me." She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Belief is easy when it is deserved. That night, back in my condo, I stared at the city skyline. Chicago glowed with its endless energy, trains rushing, lights flickering, lives unfolding. My phone buzzed again with messages I didn't answer. For once, I wasn't consumed by them. The weight of Eleanor's trust grounded me, her faith stronger than any apology my parents could ever offer. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work. Projects piled up, deadlines loomed, but instead of exhausting me, they energized me. My colleagues, once hesitant around me, now leaned on me for leadership. When the announcement came that I had been promoted to Chief Design Officer, I stood on stage at the award gala, the glass trophy warm in my hands as my team cheered. The applause that filled the hall that night was different from the forced clapping at Lucas's party. It was genuine, earned, and it filled me with a pride I couldn't contain. I realized then that this was the recognition I had been searching for all along, not from family, but from people who valued me for who I was. After the ceremony, Sophie raised a glass in my honor. "To Melissa," she said, her smile wide. Proof that hard work and self-respect beat entitlement any day. Laughter and cheers followed, and for the first time, I felt surrounded by people who truly saw me, without condition or comparison. When I returned home that evening, the condo felt different. It wasn't just walls and furniture. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for, everything I had defended, my sanctuary, my victory. I looked at the skyline one last time before bed, the city lights twinkling like promises of the future. My parents' faces, their apologies, their pleas, all of it faded into the background. Lucas's downfall, my mother's isolation, my father's crumbling empire, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was this. I had chosen myself, and in that choice, I had found peace. The following morning, I woke to a stream of sunlight slipping through the curtains and the steady hum of the city below. For the first time in months, I felt rested. The chaos, the humiliation, the betrayal, all of it had carved scars into me, but they were no longer bleeding. They had hardened, shaped me into someone new. I brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the condo, and sat by the window with my notebook. Writing had become a ritual, a way to untangle the mess in my head. That morning, I wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. "I am not defined by them." It was true. For years, my identity had been tangled up with the Carters, with their judgments, their expectations, their endless comparisons. But standing there in my own space, surrounded by the evidence of what I had built, I realized my story was mine alone to write. Later that week, Sophie and I met at a small bookstore cafe we both loved. She slid into the booth across from me, her usual energy lighting up the room. "You look different," she said, studying me. "Calmer, stronger." I smiled. "I feel different, like I finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't even realize I had." She leaned forward. "That's because you finally put yourself first. That's not selfish, it's survival, and it's inspiring." Her words lingered with me. For so long, I had equated self-preservation with guilt. Now I saw it for what it was, the only path forward. Back at work, things shifted too. My colleagues no longer whispered with pity, they spoke to me with respect. They asked for my opinions in meetings, deferred to my decisions, and invited me into projects I had once been excluded from. The viral story had made me visible, but my persistence, my ideas, my willingness to lead, that was what kept their faith in me. Still, the shadow of my family hovered at the edges. I heard from mutual acquaintances that my father was struggling to keep his company afloat, his once loyal employees questioning his authority. My mother, desperate to cling to whatever fragments of her social life remained, tried to organize small gatherings, but few people showed. Lucas, I was told, had moved into a modest apartment outside the city. He rarely went out. When I thought of them now, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like looking back at a life I had already left behind. They had chosen their path. I had chosen mine. One evening, as I watched the city lights from my balcony, my phone buzzed with a notification from Eleanor. It was an email, simple and direct. "Melissa," it began, "remember this always. Strength is not about how hard you fight, but about how clearly you see what is worth fighting for. You chose wisely. You chose yourself." I read it twice, then a third time. Her words weren't just advice, they were validation, a reminder that even when the world tried to strip me bare, I had the power to decide my worth. 3 months after the party, life had settled into something steady again. My promotion had given me new challenges, ones I embraced with determination. My evenings were filled with laughter and debate with Sophie, with dinners alongside colleagues who had become friends, with calls from Eleanor where she shared stories from her youth that made me laugh until my sides ached. I no longer checked the news for mentions of the Carters. Their downfall had become old gossip, their names faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals. In truth, I didn't need to follow their story. It wasn't mine anymore. What was mine was the quiet joy of waking up each morning in a space I had fought to protect. The pride of walking into an office where people looked at me not with doubt but with trust. The peace of knowing that I had built a family of my own choosing, people who lifted me instead of tearing me down. On a quiet Friday night, Sophie and I sat on the couch with takeout containers scattered on the coffee table. She raised her chopsticks like a toast. "To fresh starts," she said, grinning. I clinked my glass of water against her gesture. "To fresh starts," I echoed. The city hummed outside, but inside, everything was calm. The condo, once nearly stolen from me, had become a sanctuary not because of its walls or its view, but because of what it represented: my independence, my strength, my refusal to surrender. As I leaned back into the cushions, a thought crossed my mind. For the first time in years, I didn't want their approval. I didn't need it. I had learned something far more valuable: that the truest family is not determined by blood, but by the respect and love that flows freely, without conditions. I closed my eyes, letting the moment sink in, the future stretching wide before me, a future I had carved on my own terms. The spring sun warmed the glass of my condo as I stood by the window, the city alive with sound and color. Trains rattled in the distance, horns echoed faintly, and people hurried along the sidewalks below, each carrying their own story. Mine, I realized, had reached a turning point. What had once been a chain of betrayals and humiliations had transformed into something else. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, I could still choose myself. Work consumed much of my days, but it no longer drained me. As Chief Design Officer, I thrived in meetings where my voice mattered, where ideas sparked and grew into projects that carried my signature. Each success was a brick in the foundation of the life I was building, a life independent of the Carter name. At the end of long days, I came home not to loneliness, but to peace. Eleanor called often, her sharp wit intact, her stories weaving lessons into laughter. One evening, she told me about the time she had walked away from her own father's demands, refusing to marry the man he had chosen for her. "He told me I would regret it," she said, chuckling softly. "But I never did. You see, Melissa, regret only comes from betraying yourself." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. I thought of my parents, of Lucas, of the path they had chosen and the regret that surely haunted them. I thought of my own choice, painful as it had been, and how it had set me free. Sophie remained my anchor, her laughter filling the condo during our late-night talks. We planned trips we might one day take, argued over films, and shared small joys that reminded me what real connection felt like. With her, I was never the shadow of someone else's golden child. I was simply Melissa, and that was enough. One Friday evening, I hosted a dinner for my colleagues, a small celebration of a project we had completed ahead of schedule. As we sat around the table, plates emptying and glasses clinking, one of them raised a toast. "To Melissa," he said, smiling. "Proof that standing tall pays off." The others echoed it, laughter and warmth filling the room. My chest tightened with gratitude. This, I realized, was family too, the kind you choose, the kind that chooses you back. Later, when the condo was quiet again, I stood by the window, the skyline glittering against the night. My award for innovation gleamed on the shelf, a silent testament to the battles I had fought and won. I thought of that night months ago, of the slap, the humiliation, the crowd's whispers, and then I thought of the moment I said no, the moment I chose myself. That choice had changed everything. As the city pulsed below, I whispered to the glass, as if the lights themselves needed to hear it. "I am enough." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it.